You're listening to Little Rockers Radio. Thanks for listening. Now, when we're bringing our little bundles of joy home for the first time, most of us, definitely me included, are an absolute mess. There's safety considerations from the moment we get home, and then these obviously change and increase as our babies grow, start to crawl, start to walk. Each year, about 250 Australian children between the age of a newborn, so 0 to 14, are killed, and 58,000 are hospitalised by unintentional injuries, the kind that we often refer to as accidents. Many of these are easily prevented by simple means, and today I'm talking to Carolyn Ziegler. She's the co-founder and product development director of global child safety and care brand Dreambaby. She's been involved in child safety for 35 years. Hi Carolyn, how are you?
I'm really well. How are you today?
I'm really well, thank you. Now, when I read those stats, especially 58,000 children being hospitalised by unintentional injuries, that's really confronting. What are some age-appropriate changes that we can make today to keep our children safe around the home?
We're very busy today, and we really need to look at our environment and just check everything is in place, you know what's going on. So, a lot of people don't realise that a slightly older sibling can be quite the hazard to a baby. You never leave your babies alone. You make sure that even if there are other toddlers around, that little toys aren't around, just simple things. For me, what I tell people generally is to get down on all fours and actually look up as if you were that child, so that you're looking at it from their point of view. And crawling around is the best. You want to make sure that children are always supervised. But, you can't always keep an eye on every moment. So sometimes using even a child safety gate to keep a pet out of that area near your child is something that you need to consider. You have to make sure that this is just the simple stuff. You just, vacuum and sweep regularly to make sure things haven't been dropped. A lot of the time we have to be careful in case somebody's dropped a coin or some medicines or, have fallen on the floor. You've just got to be very vigilant. Using locks to keep children out of cabinets is very important. And using a very large variety of locks actually is really good, because kids learn through watching repeated actions. So if they keep seeing you push down on a lock, they're going to learn that's what you do. So if you're choosing locks that work in different ways, it becomes harder for children to work out how to open all of these locks. Things to think about also is, making sure that you're away from blind cords.
Yes.
Never put your cot or your crib near a window where there's a blind cord. Even for older siblings, you've just got to be careful, because those long cords are quite the strangulation hazard. And, using a cord wind-up where you can shorten the blind or the blind cord is just fantastic. Another thing to think about is making sure all flat-screen TVs and furniture is secured to the wall. You really want to make sure that children can't knock these over and have the furniture or TVs fall on them. So using TV savers and furniture straps and anchors is a really fantastic thing that is easy to do. You just have to make sure you install them correctly. Another thing is to make sure you remove tablecloths. It's something I tell all new young parents. Crawling children love to pull on things. So if they see a tablecloth, they're going to pull on it. So if you've removed it, you take away that option. If a child pulls on a tablecloth, it might have, pepper grinders, candlesticks, anything can come tumbling down, including knives and even that hot coffee, and you don't want children to scald themselves. You've got to be really, really careful. Coffee tables themselves, be very careful in your choice of a coffee table. You want to make sure it's got a rounded corner, things that it's solid. You don't want glass, because, we've all seen kids throw themselves onto furniture. You want to make sure that it's absolutely solid and you don't have an issue. And remember also to keep an eye on anything you put on coffee tables. You don't want a glass of wine on there, nibbles, your nuts. They're all choking hazards, let alone today you've got a lot of children with allergies. You've just got to make sure all of those things are kept very carefully out of reach. You just want to make sure that all little things are out of the way. you just want to keep those kids almost in a bubble without keeping them in a bubble.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds very overwhelming. If you're a new mum and you've just come home with a newborn that obviously doesn't do a lot of moving around, it sounds very overwhelming, but you do change, you do adapt, and you do get used to it as your children grow. The other really big thing I think is also batteries, especially when they're in remote controls or TV remotes or children's toys.
Totally true.
Yeah, yep. Now, what are some of the more, out of the obviously 58,000 children hospitalised, are there some more common injuries from that, and I guess therefore some more common oversights around the home that can lead to those more common injuries?
I think that's where you've got a lot of little toys or things that are down that become choking hazards. And, it really, every single family situation is different. And I think that's part of the reason it's overwhelming. What works for one person may not be exactly the same for another. And that's where using a gate to block off areas so that your child can't be potentially bitten by a pet there are just so many things that are unpredictable. But I think also people need to, or parents need to look at it in a, sort of like a very careful, as their child grows, things will develop. While we want to be prepared, we want to also look at our own child and our own situation and whether we've got a lot of stairs in a home. Stairs are always an issue. People don't, they think, I'm carrying my child, but all of a sudden one day they see their child heading up towards the stairs. They didn't even realise they could crawl.
Yes.
And all of a sudden they're there.
Yes.
And it's the unexpected, I think, that's really what people just get surprised by, these gorgeous little bundles of joy that do nothing at the beginning, all of a sudden are getting into everything, and, it's just the unexpected. And some children are more placid than others. Some are, children are curious. You want them to be learning. You want them to be investigating. You want them to be doing all of the things that can be used as a learning curve for them, and you're learning around them. And by that, you're then learning what can go wrong. Look, it's great to be prepared. And as I said before, getting down on all fours and crawling around and looking up at all of those potential dangers is unbeatable. But, it really, every child is different. But I also tell people to do what's right for them. Don't get too panicked. A child's not going to one day get up, run to the cupboard and start drinking something from under the sink. Saying that, we also want people to know, make sure you have got that prepared. You want to move all of those poisons out of reach into a locked cabinet well out of reach. There you have to think ahead. You don't want to leave that to the last minute because kids will do things unexpectedly. But you also have to remember children will develop. They're not going to just get up and run to the front door, one day to the next. They're going to surprise you. But, there's also a developmental stage that you adjust to with your child. You're developing as much as they are. It's really quite fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always, when mine were little, I always put them in the, it was like a porta cot big playpen. So if I wanted to go off and have a shower or whatever, and they were crawling, I would just put them in there. At least then I knew they were safe, so I could take the time to have a shower or do whatever I needed to do as well.
Yeah, we sell a lot of playpens for exactly that.
Yeah, exactly. Now,
I also tell people with playpens, sometimes they may want to just do their ironing inside a playpen. Move the ironing board inside the playpen so that you're contained and your child can be in the room with you there, and you're doing your ironing in a safe spot so they can't actually access the iron or the ironing board.
Yeah, that's a fabulous idea. And I actually never, when my children were little, I never got on my hands and knees to have a look around the home. I didn't actually hear that advice until after they were a little bit older. But that's probably also a great idea. A lot of children go to grandparents' houses during the week to be looked after. It's also a great idea to do at grandparents' house, isn't it, to make sure their homes are safe?
Absolutely so, because the thing, unfortunately, a lot of grandparents end up taking little tablets and these things fall, as our eyesight gets a little bit foggier as we get older, we don't always find them straight away and we tend to forget them. But grandparents also have become a staple carer in these days, because everybody, unfortunately, financial situation in today's climate, parents are having to work more. And, a lot of grandparents also want their homes set up so that they can, it doesn't look like it's a creche. So you want things that can also be put up and yet easily removed. So, a lot of the time they might use a child safety gate. We've got some gorgeous gate. Our Dreambaby Cosmopolitan gate has a stay open feature in the door. So the actual door, when the kids have gone home, can actually be deactivated and left open. Or because it's a simple pressure mounted gate, it can even be removed. It's really easy to install. We also have locks which are totally hidden out of out of view. We've got one that's called the mag lock, which actually is an adhesive lock, and it has a disengaging feature. So by disengaging it, you use the lock, you can use the cupboard exactly as normal, and when the kids come over, you can engage it, and that way it's locked, and you've got all of these things out of the way. Yet, it doesn't look like you've done that. You've got this looking all beautiful and pristine. It doesn't look like you've got these little munchkins constantly there and in preparation, so you can actually tailor how you want your home according to your need.
Now, we've been talking about inside the house, and we tend to think inside when we're talking about child-proofing our home. What about outside?
Oh, here, new plethora of things that can go wrong. If you've got pets, make sure you've cleaned up any droppings in the garden, because that's really, really important to make sure, that children aren't playing with the wrong things. If you've got hoses or long cords, make sure they're kept out of reach. Even a hose could be a strangulation hazard. You want to make sure there's no sharp objects in the garden. Things get left, like you might have a tool from gardening that's been left there. You need to make sure that gets locked away. If you've been outside and you're entertaining, you never know, sometimes someone's dropped a glass. You've cleaned it up as well as you can, but you want to make sure that glass has been removed. But likewise, if there was a table with glasses on it, you want to make sure those things are totally out of reach. Barbecuing. I don't know about you, but I love doing a barbecue. And if you've had the barbecue on, it's very hot, you want to make sure all children are kept away from the barbecue. Again, if you're using a little barbecue, you can actually put that into a playpen while you're barbecuing. But if it's a built-in, just make sure it's completely cooled off as well, so if kids are nearby. Swimming pools, that's another issue altogether. Make sure you've got a proper pool fence. Make sure the gate's got the self-locking mechanism, and make sure there's no furniture or potted plants that a child can use to climb on to get over that fence. That's a big issue. People don't realise that furniture is the problem. And we need to make sure our kids can swim at an early age as well. The other thing also is make sure your kids are in sight, and that you've got adult supervision when they're playing outside. Even in your own backyard, you just want to know that you can see them. If you can't be out there, at least make sure you've got definite access, that you can see them. Chemicals for that pool that we mentioned a moment ago, make sure they're locked away, likewise with fertilisers. And for those people with gardens in front of the house, even though your fences are locked, make sure you're out there. If a ball goes over, you want to make sure your child doesn't try to run climb up over the fence and run onto the road. It's really important to have all of those things. You still, again, you want your children to explore, you want them to play, you don't want to put them in that, sort of in a scared mode. You want them to learn, and they learn by investigating. They learn by playing. It's your job to keep them safe.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's about being mindful of all of those things, and also driveway safety if you're parking in the driveway or up in the garage as well, which, like you say, with the pool is another whole area that could be discussed in a separate interview. You mentioned some of the products that you sell. For anyone that's listening who is interested in finding out more or having a look at any of those products, they can visit dreambaby.com.au. Where else can we find more information?
You can, on our website, you can also check with KidSafe. You can also go and see our products in places such as Big W, Bunnings, Baby Bunting, so many places.
All right, so for all the information and all of the links, you can also visit our site at www.littlerockersradio.com.au. Thanks very much for joining us today, Carolyn.
Thank you for having me.
That was Carolyn Ziegler talking to us about safety around the home. Thanks for listening.